Hello guys, this section is about 1.1.2 hexadecimal. Unlike binary, there are more types of questions which you are required to know, and we're going to go over them today. So these are the questions that we're going to go over one by one. We'll look at how to do convergence between hexadecimal, binary, and denary, and why is hexadecimal used in computers like the binary is used in computers, and some uses of hexadecimal, and finally an explanation question on MAC address. So the first question is doing conversion of hexadecimal into denary and binary. Between converting hexadecimal into binary or denary, I always recommend you to convert it to binary first. Well, but it doesn't really matter if you can do arithmetic super concisely and fast. The reason for this is you are less likely to make mistakes as you follow the steps carefully. Just like how I mentioned in the binary video, grouping 4 digits is extremely useful in solving these kinds of conversions. So for example, in this question, you each assign one hexadecimal into 4 binary digits because the question wants you to change this hexadecimal value into denary digits. So after you assign one hexadecimal, each hexadecimal into 4 binary digits, you can then put them together and convert it to a denary number, like we practiced before in denary binary conversion in the previous video. If the question were to ask, change this denary value into hexadecimal, you would do the opposite. So what you would do is first change the denary into a binary number, then divide the binary number into 4 digits by drawing lines, and you'll change that 4 digits into a 1 hexadecimal value, and if you put that together, you'll get a hexadecimal value. So changing from hexadecimal to denary, you must pass a step which requires writing of binary. This is a variation of the question that asks you to fill out hex register, and this just means converting it into binary, which is even easier because you don't have to convert it to denary. So I'll quickly skip the calculator parts of these questions because I believe you can do it easily. So now let's move on to the part where we really need to know what to write. The second question is just like binary. Why is hex preferred by programmers or designers? It is usually a 2-mark question. So memorizing 2 points is just enough for this type of question. So I would recommend you to memorize that hexadecimal is easier to read and write, and hexadecimal can represent values in a shorter way. These are the most easier points you can memorize. And the question might ask you why hexadecimal is preferred in a specific context. This part is where the level of question might go a little harder. For example, the question may ask why is it better in debugging the program. Because the question asks you to why is it better in debugging, you can't write easier to debug because it is given in the question. You have to break down into why is it easier to debug. I know it is hard, but you have to conclude that it is easier to spot errors and easier to identify values, so that it is easier to debug. So if this question is given in a general context, you can write the universal points, like the first 2 points I introduced to you, and if a specific purpose or scenario is given, you have to modify answer. And my tip is think why is hexadecimal an advantage for that specific purpose. And you don't really have to think hard. Now, next question is uses of hexadecimal. Unlike binary, IGCSE likes to ask uses of hexadecimal. You can just easily memorize these main uses. So hexadecimal are used in color codes like HTML, and it is also used in error messages and memory dump and IP addresses. So the question would come up, write 3 uses of hexadecimal, and you can just pick from these points. The final question is about MAC address. This might be the most challenging question of this chapter. So the question requires you an explanation about MAC address. So how would you explain it? First, for a term in computer science which has an acronym like this MAC in MAC address, you can always say the full name to get a mark. So if you're right, MAC address is a media access control address, you would get 1 mark. So besides the term, you can also get points for the properties and structures of the MAC address. So if you break down into properties and structure for points, for the properties, you can get points for MAC address that MAC address is unique, MAC address is static, meaning it does not change, and MAC address is set by a manufacturer, which is not really a property, but I included in a property. These each award you 1 marks. And for the structure, you can show that the first part is for the manufacturer ID and second part is the serial number. As you look at this slide, there's this MAC address. The first part is for the manufacturer ID and second part is the serial number. And if you just explain that, you'll get each marks for explaining the part in the MAC address. So these are the essential types of question that you have to familiarize yourself and prepare for the final exam. I think that's all for this hexadecimal chapter. And thank you.